Good morning, Waukee Christian Church. My name is Pastor Gray Fredericks, and welcome to my study, where we are conducting our first of many digital Sunday schools for people who want to follow along with what we are learning in Sunday school from a distance. We are going over the book Holy Chaos as we're returning to Sunday school this September. And last Sunday, we covered the introduction in our small group, and we had a blast going through these concepts and ideas that our author Amanda Henderson has laid in her introduction. So we only went over the introduction, and as the Sundays go on, and as these weeks go on, we're going to be doing more and more. So eventually we're going to get through this whole book. These videos are so that you can read with us and follow along with us, and then you can participate online by leaving comments and asking questions, just like you would in regular Sunday school. So without further ado, let's get into it. This book, Holy Chaos, is a challenging book. It's going to confront us and our biases and our opinions where we are. And that's pretty evident, especially in the very first lines of the book. So as we get into the introduction, the author, Amanda Henderson, begins by talking about the 2016 presidential election and how it was a traumatic incident for her. And for a lot of Americans, that was a traumatic time. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, you're going to have a feeling about how this author begins the book. And I recommend that when you have that feeling, whether it be, I agree with what this author is saying, or if it is, I don't really like that she's beginning with such a political slight, I encourage you to hold on to it. Hold on to that feeling, whatever it is. Are you very happy about what she's talking about? Do you find that you have something in common with her? Or are you very upset because this is someone maybe you wanted to see in the White House? Wherever you are, hold on to that feeling, because you're going to be feeling it a lot in this book. And this is what we're going over. Divisive times. What made the presidential election even harder for Amanda Henderson was that her father was struggling with cancer at the same time. And her father was one of those who was happy about it. So she lived in this strange duality of trying to be safe around her father's feelings and what he was going through and not bring up politics, but also sort of mourning herself with what had just happened in this country. Over the course of this book, the author talks about things. I'm just going to give you a few snippets of things that I really liked, things that really spoke to me. So just some of my highlighted things. When the author begins talking much more about leaders, about division, she says some things like on page XI, rarely are leaders on the side of the people. Quite often, there are radically different views and experiences within societies and even within individual families. Isn't that true? How many of you have families where you disagree with someone who believes something of the polar opposite of what you believe in? Someone who you can't interact with on social media, or you have to watch your P's and Q's when you meet in person. I think probably all of us have people like that. And if you don't, is that a good thing? Something worth considering as we keep moving forward. The author talks about Darwinian notions of survival of the fittest on page XII, and that was a concept that sort of flew over a lot of our heads. But I'd just like to break it down a little bit. This book was written this year at the very beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. And at that time, only 20,000 people had died from the coronavirus pandemic. As it stands right now, in September of 2020, we're around 10 times that, getting up very close to 200,000. The author talks about leaders and their negligence toward the homeless population, stuffing them into overcrowded shelters where there were no pandemic safety measures. And so this idea, the Darwinian notion of survival of the fittest, basically takes cues from Charles Darwin, who saw survival of the fittest as the creatures who are most able to adapt would survive. And we have sort of translated that into this socioeconomic model where the wealthy and affluent live and the poor are let down. They are let to die. We neglect them. It should go without saying that this is not a Christian value that we practice in this country. The idea that the poor should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and that we have no obligation to them. In fact, it says over and over in the Bible that we absolutely do. In the prophets, Amos, Isaiah, they repeat over and over again how Israel has failed to take care of their poor, to take care of the widows and the orphans and the wayfarer and the aliens. And we have gotten to a point, it seems, and especially Amanda Henderson would agree with this, that our faith only serves us sometimes, and we become okay with it. This is something that she intends to confront, and it's something worth thinking about as we move forward. Eventually, Amanda Henderson moves into definitions of common words, and we spoke in Sunday school about common words. If you say a word enough, it starts to look weird, right? If you say a word over and over in normal speech, we sort of begin to take it for granted. It sort of loses its meaning, its impact, its oomph in our daily lives. So she asks us to examine these common words and what they mean to us. So what I would encourage you to do is when I say one of these words, you say your definition. I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And then we're going to go over Amanda Henderson's definition and discuss it very briefly. The first word is holy. So the word holy, according to Amanda Henderson, is the connection to that which is beyond. The sense that something is more significant than a moment, the realization that surely God is in this place. We spoke in the Sunday school about places that were holy to us. We talked about the church is a holy place. Sure, these grounds here are a holy place. Absolutely. But for some people, places are holy that are not holy to others. Consider your hometown. Maybe you're from a smaller place, a place with only one main street, a place that if you were taking a trek across the country, you might not even stop for gas. I spent a lot of time driving around Iowa in a previous career, and I can say that those kind of places are pretty common around here. For most of us, they don't matter, but for some of us, they're holy. And so holiness is a broad thing where God is, but it's also an individual thing. And the opposite of holiness is profane. So when we use the word profane, sometimes we think profanity. But I encourage you to think profane is just something that is not holy, either ultimately or not holy to you. It's profane. It doesn't mean anything. The next word that Amanda Henderson asks us to consider is the word chaos. The author describes chaos in this way: an anxiety-producing feeling of instability, disorientation. When things are moving so fast, it is challenging to step back, think, breathe, and gain perspective. We all have episodes in our life where we struggle in chaos. Whether it's economic problems or it's family drama, it could be anything from the change of a job to moving to a new place. Sometimes it's illness that has thrown a wrench in the gears of our lives. Sometimes it's someone's death, where we find ourselves reeling, disoriented, wondering where we're supposed to go next. That is chaos. It's confusing and it's hard and it's uncomfortable. But I think as the author will move through this book, we'll find that chaos is not only necessary, but maybe will present us with some opportunities as well. The next word is faith. The author describes faith this way: a deep trust and practice that points us toward God. Faith is concerned with systems, theories, and rituals that undergird and define a religious belief or practice. Ultimately, for me, faith looks like actions that are grounded in a deeply held belief and commitment to core values or religious teachings. I am less concerned with what your religion is and more concerned with what your religion does. How do your religious beliefs shape the way you move through the world? We spoke about faith in the Sunday school class, and I thought it was an absolutely rich discussion, and it helped us to look into other perspectives. One of our attendees described faith that it is believing in the unbelievable, the cosmic, the supernatural. And yes, absolutely, it can mean that for some people. And in fact, sometimes God, in the Gospel of Matthew, as Peter, that we've been preaching about in our sermon series, as Peter has tried to do faith, when he loses that belief, he ultimately stumbles. But faith, in my opinion, and I think in Amanda's opinion, is more than that. When you are a faithful spouse, it is not just because you believe that your spouse exists. When you are faithful to a cause, it's not just because you agree that that cause is something that happens. Faith is an action word. Faith is something we do. Faith is the way that we act out the gospel in the world. You can't have faith just by sitting down and believing something. Faith is demonstrated. Faith is something that you shouldn't ever have to tell people that you have in order for them to recognize that you have it. Think of it like a beautiful princess. If she has to tell people and argue with people that she's beautiful, maybe she's not. Something worth considering. The next word is politics. Politics, according to Amanda Henderson, is the art of navigating life together. This includes negotiation and decision-making to determine the rules and boundaries that support shared experience in personal and public realms. When we use the word politics, we often think about national politics. Democrats versus Republicans, conservatives versus liberals. We think about the overarching powers in the world. What if we reel it back in and consider that, yes, that is politics, but also politics is our personal interactions. If you've ever worked in an office, you realize that politics is there. If you've ever been part of a big family, you realize politics is there. Politics exists between married couples, between best friends, between enemies, between divorced parents. Politics is everywhere. It's the way we move about the world. I like to think of the word politics and consider its root word policy. That politics is just the way, the structures, the systems that we have in place, whether they are formalized, indoctrinated, legislated into place, or whether they are unspoken, the way that we do things. That's politics. The next word is daily. Daily. D-A-I-L-Y. Daily. Amanda Henderson's definition for daily is concerned with the everyday commitment to particular actions, grounded in resilience and the pragmatic necessity of the long haul, persistent, recurring needs of the living. That's a bigger definition than maybe you came up with. It's a bigger definition than any of us came up with, and it's worth repeating at least the last part, grounded in resilience and the pragmatic necessity of the long haul, persistent, recurring needs of the living. For this author, the word daily is not just day to day, every 24 hours as the cycle repeats infinitely. It is intentional, moving in a good way, being the hands and feet of God over and over again with pragmatism and with resilience, which means standing up to the hard things. I know that in our society, we tend to not live in the present. It's very easy to be distracted by social media, our smartphones, video games, television shows. We have such a surplus of media that it is impossible for us to consume all of it. This is unprecedented. It never used to be this way. There used to be not enough to entertain human beings, and now there's too much. It makes us lose sight of things. At its worst, we live in a constant flux of depression and anxiety, where depression leaves us stuck in the past, thinking about about the things that maybe we've done wrong or could have done better. And anxiety makes us stuck in the future, thinking about the things we can do wrong and the things we can make mistakes on. And so we don't live in the present at all when things are bad. But she asks us to. She asks us to be intentional with our day-to-day and consider our location right now. And this is sort of the cornerstone of mindfulness meditation as well, to not live in the past and future, but to live instead in the moment and appreciate the moment all around you and the little things as well. And for Amanda Henderson, that means exacting justice in the world. That means being good, being compassionate, and being kind in the things that we're doing right now, and not just plan for it to happen and not just be disappointed that we didn't do it in the past. Our next and final word is love. I'm going to give you a little more time for this one to consider and to mull around in your mouth before we say the definition. The author defines love in this way: a relationship that is mutual and generative and moves toward justice in the world. Through nurture, love happens between people, in families and chosen families, with neighbors and communities, between strangers, in cities, states, countries, and political systems. There is a key word here, and it's one that she has italicized in this text: justice. What is justice? I think that in our society, we translate justice in a way that is tit for tat. If someone does evil to you, then evil should be done to them. And if something does good to you, then good should be done for them. And so we sort of legislate karma, if that makes sense. In the Bible, that's not what justice is. In the Bible, we talk about, especially in the Old Testament, mishpat, which is the Hebrew word for justice. It is not the justice we know. It is justice that seeks to tend to the needs of the poor, regardless of whether they've earned it in our eyes. It is to make sure that everyone has a full belly. All the sick get healed. All of the wayfarers and aliens are settled and cared for. All of the people who don't fit in our mold of belief or culture are still recognized as children of God and are still praised and affirmed and accepted. Just because they're not us doesn't mean they don't deserve compassion. And that is a sure sign of love. And it is, like she says, between strangers in cities, states, countries, and political systems. Think about what we talked earlier about politics. There's such a schism, and it's ever widening, between two different polar opposites of the political spectrum. And we find that it's very easy to be unkind and unloving and uncharitable to the other side. And we use scathing language and meanness and bullying to make them feel bad about their convictions. But that's not love. And although the author begins this book talking about how disappointed she was with the last presidential election, she does still reinforce that we need to have kindness and compassion and love, regardless of how we feel about that. Hopefully you stuck around after that introduction, if that's not something that you believe in or not something that you can relate to see that the author is also struggling with these same things. And it might not be in the same flavor. It might not be in the same way that you do, but it's still a struggle. And a struggle to love is what embodies holy chaos. So that is our introduction, and that is the first part of the book. And I realize this has been a lengthy video, but if you've watched till the end, I appreciate it. Make sure that you stay tuned for next week. We'll be uploading our next video talking about chapter 1 in this book. Until then, thanks for watching. Bye.